Well, welcome, everybody. We're going to get started with today's training. Glad to have you here for Optimizing Time of Service Collections with Elizabeth Woodcock. We're really excited to have her back again this month and look forward to hearing what she has for us today. I do want to really say a special thank you to TriZetto Provider Solutions, for sponsoring this training and last month's training as well. So just as a reminder to mute yourself until you have a question for Elizabeth or a comment, just so that it avoids having any background noise during the presentation. The format we're going to follow will be the same as last month. Elizabeth will give her presentation, then she's going to take a little bit of a break, and Lori Roberts from TriZetto Provider Solutions is going to talk a little bit about their products and services, and then we'll finish with a Q&A session with Elizabeth. So with that, Elizabeth, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. And I truly, really appreciate the opportunity. It's such a privilege to be here for y'all today. And I'm so excited that we have so many folks on the line. I know it's been challenging weather throughout this winter, and just really appreciate your attendance today because I know it's an important investment of your time. And so our focus for our webinar training today is optimizing collections at the time of service. I think it's fairly intuitive, but just to repeat the obvious, that this really is our opportunity to collect. Once that patient walks out the door of your chiropractic office, your probability of collecting from that patient goes down literally by the minute. So we want to really hone in on this great opportunity at the point of service to collect from the patient. So I think most of you were on the line last month during our session, but I am very fortunate to have been in the industry now for 25 years, actually long before we even talked about patient collections. In fact, I remember physicians when I went in to do training on little cute little $10 copayments here and there that we had pop up in the late 1990s. Physicians would tell me, now Elizabeth, money and medicine don't mix. And they would kick me out of their clinic because they didn't want their staff trained to collect. Oh my, how times have changed. So optimizing collections at the point of service will really focus on our call to action, and then we'll discuss those strategies to really improve your point of service collections. I know this is a very important investment of your time, and so I would ask you to go ahead and take out your iPad, take out a pad of paper, and let's make sure that on that document, whether electronic or paper, you have put at least 3 items on your action plan. Because I can guarantee, no matter where you are located, there'll be some sort of fire to put out this afternoon. I don't know if your phones will go down or you'll have 3 patients in a row no-show. Something will happen and it will be crazy and insane. So take the opportunity to record those 3 items because you'll probably need to come back to them tomorrow, next week, and perhaps even next month to remind yourself, okay, here's the action that I want to take for my practice. Now, please recall that we talked about kind of a more strategic viewpoint of patient collections in January. So I do believe that Jeff recorded those, and maybe that would be something that you wanted to reference as you really work on your action plan for patient financial responsibility. And why indeed is this so critical? Well, in my opinion, we have a new payer in the market. And no, I'm not talking about Cigna buying Aetna or Aetna buying Cigna or United buying such and such or CVS or anybody else. I'm actually talking about your patient. It is amazing because we complain about United and Medicaid and oh my goodness, don't get me started about workers' comp. But really our greatest challenge comes in to our patient. Now, I have to fault us in some regards. I told that story a few minutes ago for a purpose, in that it was just 15 years ago that we really didn't pay attention to patient financial responsibility at all. In fact, embedded on our charge tickets and the practices that I used to work at, we had, if you can believe it, a little tiny box, and next to that box, our doctors could check I only. That was the phrase, I only, with a question mark. Well, if y'all have never heard of that, the I stood for insurance. And we I only pretty much every patient who walked in our door. So what that means is we would bill the insurance, but we would write off any sort of patient cost sharing, whether it was a co-insurance, a deductible, or a co-payment. We I only'd everyone. Well, y'all, that's slightly illegal, so I'm not going to suggest that you do that today. But it really does demonstrate. We went from a point of time where we really didn't care. In fact, we even philosophically disagreed with this whole collection, to today that patient financial responsibility is indeed defining the success of our receivables management. And this is a really important, whether this is a good slide or a good picture for you, what I need you to do is to take away the concept and realize that it's not something we can put on the back burner any longer, because indeed your revenue stream is being defined by how successful you are with patient collections. And so it's time to change, and it's time to realign our processes so that we can refocus on this important payer. And kind of think of it like that. We discussed last time that indeed within that payer, there are actually 3 different health plans. The first health plan are happies. You might remember those. Those are patients who literally will walk in with their visa. Here, take my money, no worries. And then you have the patients who I like to call them nudgers, where as you start to hear about some of these tactics, you're going to think, oh, that's just so silly. That's just so stupid. But our nudgers actually need a little something, something in order to get them to want to pay, let alone to pay you. And then last but not least, you have your patients who are in the final health plan, which is the no pay health plan. They have no intention. It might be an ability, or it might be a willingness. So indeed, it's important to keep our health plans of our new payer in mind as we think about our community of patients, because each one of you are representing offices that have a little bit different mix of patients. And so one of you may say, well, this is going to work for me, but it's important to recognize, just like talking about, for example, processing claims in my market in Atlanta, our Blue Cross Blue Shield may process and have different rules and different coverage determinations and different exclusions than your payer, for example, in South Dakota. So please recognize how important it is for us to pivot. Even though we might be in the same specialty, our community of patients is going to be slightly different, and it's important for us to implement processes accordingly. So let's talk about what is absolutely minimum. Absolutely minimum. We want to make sure that you collect copayments. As you probably are aware, copayments are actually required by a payer. So I don't want to see any office signs that say our office requires copayments at the point of service, because you don't. The payer requires the copayment, not you. So if the patient does have insurance coverage, again, that copayment is indeed a part and parcel of that requirement for the payer to pay. And speaking of that, like, what exactly is a copayment anyway, and a coinsurance and a deductible? These are cost sharing mechanisms that insurance companies use, in essence, to give us pause as patients to go seek care from a doctor, or a facility. Let's think about this. If none of us who had insurance coverage had any copayments or co-insurance, well, I got to tell you, I'd probably be at the doctor a lot more than I am today. Indeed, we think about, oh, well, that copayment for the ED is 400, so let me go to this, let me go to that. Like, it's starting to become part of our dialogue. And so if we, on the receiving end at the office, don't collect these required cost sharings, we're actually doing a disservice not only to ourselves, interestingly enough, but to the payer as well. Copays, coinsurance, deductibles are all a form of cost sharing that, again, our insurance companies use in order to reduce or at least control utilization. In fact, there are a number of states that have copayments, small, for Medicaid patients, and I know of offices that have been able to successfully go to their state Medicaid plans and say, hey, listen, I have patients who are non-compliant with the $3 copayment. How long should I tolerate this? And the Medicaid plan will actually intervene on behalf of the office. I'm not suggesting in any way that this is going to be a great solution. It's going to give you a lot of money, but understanding the dynamics, I think, is very important for us from a collection perspective. And you may even have some payers that will help you with this process. Now, for those patients who have no insurance, I actually don't like to call them self-pay patients because for some reason, a number of years ago, that became synonymous with no pay patients or zero pay patients. So I like to reference these patients as full pays because that's exactly what the framework in terms of payment actually is. They are expected to pay in full. I want to make sure that your office has some sort of deposit policy. I generally find that full pay deposits are, well, not always, but a large percentage of the time, all that you'll ever see from that patient. So you want to make sure you set those full pay deposits wisely. Set them to be one rate. And the reason I say that is because I wouldn't want to have Joe Smith come in and he's charged $50, and then Mary Sue comes in the next day and she's charged $150. Well, they happen to be neighbors and they're saying, well, why did my chiropractor charge me $50 and wow, charge you $150? So you want to avoid any challenges associated with discrimination and to have a policy and to make sure you set it forth in motion consistently. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't consider a charity care or a financial hardship protocol, so that would come off the deposit, but make sure, at least in my opinion, that you set that deposit in writing and you set it to be a consistent amount. Last but not least, and I know this is a no-brainer, but I am shocked at how many offices don't move forward with this. They don't collect balances at the point of service. Now, sometimes I think it's this issue of I'm the front office, I'm not the billing office, the billing people are back there, they do their job, I do mine. And so balances are kind of not really my job. In fact, at the front office, I've actually been observing practices before and had receptionists say just that. It's not my job. But remember, you all work for a business. Your office is a business, and it's absolutely vital to recognize that when a patient gets a bill, they know they have a balance. They come into your office the next day, and they're like, remember, they're a nudger, not a happy. And they're saying to themselves, yeah, I mean, I know I have got a balance. Let's see if he or she asks for it. And you don't. So what happens in that patient's mind, even if they have the bills stuck in their purse right there, is philosophically, oh, well, I mean, they didn't ask about it, so clearly they don't actually expect me to pay. Our happies would have likely already paid. They would have insisted on handing you the check. Our nudgers are who we lose in this scenario. One of the reports that I love to do at the front office, which I will tell you, I think is an absolutely crucial part of the revenue cycle, is the if not, why not report. So if you have all of the patients listed either electronically or on paper, and then according to your chiropractic office, in terms of the protocols, are you going to do full pays? Are you going to do co-pays for patients with coverage? Are you going to do balances? So you decide what you want to do in terms of point of service collections. And then you record, okay, this is what I expect for the 20, 25 patients we're going to see. Here's what the due is for those patients. If the receptionist doesn't collect the amount that is due, then he or she has to write down the status of collection. Just the simple opportunity of writing down the status of collections often is enough to spur, at least let me try, let me attempt, because I don't want to write down, I didn't even ask the patient for it. So it oftentimes spurs the collection. It also gives you a great training manual for a supervisor or manager to sit down and say, okay, we saw 25 patients last Friday. We were only able to collect from 2 of them. And indeed, we have remarkably $1,800 outstanding that we should have, if not collected fully, at least collected partially. So let's talk about why we didn't. The if not, why not report offers an awesome opportunity to do that. Now, a lot of folks ask me, well, shouldn't I be bonusing my receptionist for collecting these monies? And indeed, when I think about a bonus, I go back and forth. Like, I totally understand, and it's a wonderful opportunity to, just give a little bit of motivation. At the same time, I would argue that our front office is indeed our directors of point of service collection. And so the business office is right there when you walk into your practice, right in front of you. There is no more front office versus the business office. Every employee of your practice is a member of the business office. And if we don't all agree and work towards that mantra, I'm going to tell you unequivocally, you're going to lose money for your chiropractic office. And so if you establish a bonus, I think it should be a bonus which not just pays the receptionist to collect at the time of service, but really incentivize everyone to be on the same team. So you may want to take a look, for example, at just revenue, kind of that classic, thermometer in the business office. Here's how we're doing in terms of tracking to what we expect week over week. You could use payday bars. That's one of my favorite little favors in the business office. Another one I love to do is the green team. So you get together in your office, maybe 2 or 3 folks, and you are the green team, and your focus is on taking opportunities to improve your revenue cycle. Hopefully, point of service collections being one of them. And you decide as the green team that everyone in the practice is part of increasing those revenue opportunities. And so the bonus becomes office-wide versus just at the front desk. Speaking of the front desk, however, this is quite a challenge because many times in a chiropractic office, we don't think about hiring someone to collect money. We think about, maybe using the computer, registering a patient, scheduling an appointment. Hopefully, we're also thinking about customer service skills. But for those of you who are listening in and you work in the front office, I would argue that you have the hardest job, most difficult job in your entire practice. And part of it is you are really the face of the administrative aspect of your office. You are the directors of not only point of service collections, but also the directors of first impressions. And yet is very, very critical from a transparency perspective for you to be able to be adept at discussing money with a patient. I do believe 15 years ago, it was sort of this gray area of money and medicine. And when we brought up money, our patients really didn't feel like they cared about us. We were or about them, excuse me. We were kind of thinking more about the financial aspects, or at least this was our perception, than we were thinking about their quality care. And yet today, patients are not fools. You and I both know we have this, oh my gosh, when we take our child to the doctor and we take ourselves to the doctor and we have to go to the hospital, we think about our deductibles, we think about our copays. Oh my goodness, how much is this going to cost me? And so if we ignore that part of the conversation, and maybe our happies are just either so wealthy or maybe so ignorant that they're just so kind, they're just going to pay us. But I think it's really, really vital for our nudgers to be able to tell them transparently how much this is going to cost. There's nothing so frustrating as being a patient ourselves and asking about that, and the staff telling us, oh, I have no idea. You'll just have to wait for your bill. It's very, very difficult. And in my opinion, it's very, very disrespectful. And so out of respect for your patients, it's critical for us to be transparent about the cost of care. You may want to create, I like having sort of a notebook. You can actually go to like a Kinko's or a copy store or a printer locally and just have them take like 4x6 cards, and you can have a binder made. I actually like to have it laminated of our different prices. Another thing I like to put in that binder is how to ask patients for money, so different scripts. And this might be kind of a knowledge guide. A lot of folks call it a knowledge guide for the practice. And you might have been there for 20 years and you don't need any sort of knowledge guide, but think about the next employee who's hired at your office. So often it takes months and months to teach someone all the nuances of your practice. And yet, if you had this knowledge guide, it's certainly not going to take care of everything, but I think it will take care of at least the basics. And what's exciting is that data has actually proven that patients who experience a clear and transparent billing process are more likely to be happy. I mean, this might seem a little wacko, but everything is about the patient experience. Again, think about our experience as patients, taking your parents in, taking your children in, taking your spouse in. You want to really know the whole kit and caboodle. It's interesting. I happened to be at a meeting this morning and I was taking an Uber. And I was sitting there on my phone, and you know, I travel all the time, so I take taxis constantly. But as I was looking at my phone, I thought to myself, you know what? I can actually see the car coming towards me. That's the transparency of those driving services. And as a customer, I feel so relieved and so respected by understanding what used to be kind of a mysterious part of the process until the car actually literally showed up, pulled up to the curb. And we're actually really kind of Ubering our industry by creating that transparency at the point of service. And I really would encourage you to think about it as a patient satisfier. Now, speaking of transparency, particularly for our nudgers, what could we give them? I think it's a wonderful idea to create a patient-friendly summary of benefits Many of our clearinghouses can provide a nice, neat, written, patient-friendly benefits summary. And so if a patient has a question about their coverage, why is this service excluded, for example, instead of you talking until you're blue in the face, you probably are still going to have to talk to the patient, but you can also share with them their coverage, their benefits. Interestingly enough, and I think this practice went a little too far, but I recently went with a practice that actually had every patient, when they established care at this practice, bring in their plan detail. You know, that's like that notebook, or that, it's really kind of actually a fairly thick book that you get when you enroll in health insurance that I think we all promptly throw away. But this practice actually had its patients bring that booklet with them as a new patient so they could go over their benefits or exclusions or coverage, etc. Another area that we can use is for our patients who do have coverage is to have our explanation of benefits. This is just one sample that you have up on the screen, but it becomes very, very helpful to share with patients, particularly for patients who are confused about financial responsibility when it's been applied to the deductible and or coinsurance. Like, we sort of as patients get the whole copayment thing, but I'm insured. Why do I have this patient financial responsibility? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so showing the patient their explanation of benefits, particularly for our nudgers, may be just what you need in order to collect that financial responsibility. And last but not least, I think this is a recommendation I would make for every single staff member and provider within your chiropractic office is a dual monitor. Y'all know this better than me. There are just too many things going on with different management systems, having to query information through our clearinghouse, run eligibility checks, et cetera, for us not to have two monitors. So if you don't have one, make sure you snap a photo of this screen and go to your doctor and say, this is a great return on investment. And again, I will back you up every day on that one. We talked about the transparency related to cost. This is a great quote or a great script that I think is wonderful to use. We appreciate your choosing us for your health care. This is just, I mean, it's just a good line, because oftentimes we kind of do a fairly good job at marketing, but then when we answer the phone, we're like, oh yeah, you want to schedule an appointment? Like, let's lead with this wonderful line. We appreciate your choosing us for your care. And then when a patient asks how much it costs, well, it may vary. And here's why. You may have some tests, you may have some other services, but I'm going to give you an estimate. And then if the patient has indicated they do have insurance, then you may want to ask them a little bit about their benefits to make sure they don't have any challenges with coverage. But if they do not have any challenges, it's a great time to recognize and indicate to them that they will get a discount. So this is something that I think is a wonderful opportunity. We call these discounts in billing terms contractual adjustments. And yet when you think about it, right, we have a charge, let's say it's $100, and we only expect X payment, maybe it's $70. And the difference between 170 for a full pay patient may be a financial hardship or a charity case, but for a contracted patient, that indeed is a contractual adjustment that we offer as a discount if you are a participating provider in exchange for the payer to route patients to you. We just sometimes forget, and we just kind of think about this as a billing term and forget that for a patient, it is indeed a discount. Now, as you well know, There are some challenges associated with our CPT coding system. And so for a patient who is covered, you may have a variety of allowables. This would be a good thing to have in your knowledge guide and your knowledge check, is to have not only your charge or your fee, but for the services that you routinely perform in your chiropractic office, to have the allowables for all of your major payers. This gives you a good reference tool for patients who haven't met their deductible. And so if they haven't, then indeed they likely owe all of their allowable. And you might say, really? Can we collect that at the point of service? I'm going to ask that you take a look at the appendix associated with our slides, with our handouts after our webinar today, because I have provided you some information about even Medicare. And I really like Medicare because there are a federal payer. So it's not a state. It oversees the states, right? It's a federal and national policy. And so if I have a Medicare policy, I can use that with my states. I can use that with my commercial payers, and to say, hey, even Medicare allows us to collect on the co-insurance, on the deductible, before a service is rendered or at the time of that service. So definitely check that out. I've seen offices use that very effectively to influence their commercial payers as well. Now, hopefully we'll have an automation of this process. There are certainly a number of vendors who do automate it, although I generally find that they're fairly expensive. But I am hopeful, just like, oh my gosh, automating order entry was like totally unheard of just 3 years ago or maybe 5 years ago. Hopefully we'll see more automation on the financial end for this process in particular. Until then, you need to make sure that you have a staff member who's working at the front office, or I like to call it the concierge, which is really what we have traditionally called checkout. But like, think about that. Checkout is just such an awful term, right? It's like, well, you're really not a patient. You're kind of a widget, and we're checking you out. It just doesn't work for me. So maybe the departure or a concierge might be something you want to think about on that checkout process. I like to call the front office first impressions. So that might also be a good nomenclature change for you as well. Whether you call it checkout or concierge or desk assistants, however, please make sure that you have a staff member who knows how to take 20% of a number. And unfortunately, I kind of mean that seriously. And this is one of the reasons I think the front office is such a challenging position, because you have to have great customer service skills, especially dealing with patients who are frustrated and in pain. Very, very challenging. And then you also have to have these incredible meticulous skills associated with registration and paperwork and all that kind of good stuff. And now I'm layering on top of that quantitative skills to make sure you calculate these numbers correctly. And so I do think it's a great idea to have, you can use these questions or others where you can have a little bit of a pre-employment test so that you can make sure the staff you are hiring know these basic math skills, because it's important to maximize our time of service collections. Now, some of what we're doing is just making sure we know how to ask patients. We don't want to say, would you like to pay today? Because our patients are going to say no. You and I would as well. How would you like to take care of your payment today? Another great idea for a patient that does have coverage is to go ahead and collect the copayment and to get it in your hands. And then to ask the patient, oh my gosh, my computer tells me that you have a small balance, because y'all, it's always small. I don't care if it's $17 or $1,700. My computer tells me I have a small balance. I mean, can we just go ahead and run your card to take care of that balance? And if you're in a situation where you have a small reception area, much better term, by the way, than a waiting room, think about it. The entrance to our business, we're so sure you're going to have to wait. That's what we've named it. So indeed, when you walk into a reception area and it's very small, you may be hesitant to provide information about balances out loud. And so you could either hand the patient an iPad or have a stack of 3x5 cards or some paper that you write down that balance, and you're asking the question, but you're not actually revealing the amount. And then once you ask the question, please, the two most important words in patient collections, stop talking. I actually mean it. Just shut up, because we have the habit of introducing the, oh, well, did you want our 30-year $2 a month plan? We'd be happy to set you up with that one. Not a good idea at all. And speaking of payment plans, try to collect first before you engage in a conversation to establish a payment plan. Ask the patient, how much more time do you need? Normally, the patient's not going to tell you 30 years, and yet sometimes that's exactly the plan we set them up with. We're not very good at this at all, so we do need to have some parameters. First of all, we want to make sure that we set a minimum payment amount. In my opinion, that minimum should be $25. $25. Once you get below $25, you're on the borderline as to whether or not there's a benefit to even collecting. Why? Because if we try to collect $5 a month, I mean, just think about the postage, the envelopes, the communication, the follow-up, making sure that the $5 is being paid. You know this better than I. It costs us money to administer payment plans. So there is a threshold that we really shouldn't go below unless there's some extenuating circumstances, because it's just too costly for us to do. And speaking of $25, normally our balances aren't in these nice, clean amounts. And so one of the things I would make a habit of doing, or more than a habit, a protocol, if you have a balance, for example, of $371.94, make sure you collect the first payment installment plus the residual in the first month. So what we can do then is have two nice and neat installments of $100. That way the patient doesn't have to think, oh my gosh, what was it, $53.16 I have to pay my chiropractor this month. Like, we want it to be as easy as possible. Remember, our aim here is to really, really capture those nudgers. And then please remember that it's not even a payment plan unless the patient actually pays something. When a patient does pay something, I would highly recommend that you have a separate financial class or financial category for those payment plans. Let's think about that on our age trial balance. If we have patient receivables all in one line, then oftentimes we sit there and we look at that and we're like, which one of these are payment plans? And the reason why we sit and think about that from an AR perspective is we have actually agreed to let those payments age. The receivables that are associated with payment plans are aging, and we have agreed to it. So what we want to do is to separate our patient pay that's in essence collectible on the right time versus our patient pay that we have agreed to let it age 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever you've set that plan up for. in my opinion, that actually needs to be moved off of our receivables and to be considered separately. Now, one of the big innovations that we have seen in terms of point of service collections, and something I would strongly recommend you consider, is a credit card on file. Now, before you look at this and you're like, oh my God, that sounds super scary. What? Keeping credit cards on file? Think about logging on. Maybe over the weekend you did some shopping, you logged on to Amazon, and how many times you go on to your online merchants and they have kept your credit card on file. Furthermore, if you got to Amazon and the product that you wanted was there but was on back order, it is likely that that vendor went ahead and took your credit card and will process that payment because it is on file when the product actually becomes available and ships out to you. I'm telling you these stories to indicate that the notion, the concept of credit card on file has actually been around in business for years now. It has just come into the medical industry. And what it means is we are capturing the patient's consent. And if you do this, I would highly recommend having a very, very good vendor, a trustworthy vendor, and to ask them about the consent they'd recommend. You swipe the credit card, and that credit card is held securely. And it's useful for a payment plan, or if an insurer has paid, then a one-time charge after that. Now, if you are very worried about your patient's reaction, oh my goodness, there's no way I would keep credit cards on file. One of the things I would ask you to do is please make sure if a patient is reticent, you ask them how much more time do they need, and then to think about integrating not just credit cards on file, but payment mechanisms on file. Oh, Ms. Woodcock, I totally understand your reticence about handing over your personal credit card. We'd be more than happy to take any sort of payment mechanism. In fact, at Walgreens, right down the street, they offer Visa, Amex, and MasterCard prepay cards. You can use that to have a payment mechanism on file, and that way we won't have your personal credit card. And of course, we will refund any of the residual. So it enables your patients to feel a little bit more comfortable with the process, with the program, and it's something that I think can really revolutionize your time of service payments. Now, we talked a little bit about our full pay patients, but please recommend looking at a minimum deposit. I like to actually have a little bit of a difference between new patients and established patients. I gave you an example of 100 versus 50. And the reason, of course, is that new patients do consume more time. They also have a higher no-show rate. And then last but not least, our new patients do typically not have any sort of financial history with our office. So it's really hard to know, is this going to be one of our happies? Will it be a nudger? Or will it be our dreaded third health plan? And that, of course, is our no pays. So what I hope we've been able to do is to record our 3 ideas. Please recognize that if you maybe just have 3, hopefully this won't happen, but if you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, or 10, one of those ideas is going to be a failure, and that's okay. Because if you're not failing, you're not doing. So make sure you start somewhere. You think, you analyze, you plan, and then you get to that steps of trying, doing, and doing again. Because chiropractic offices normally report that really getting into gear with this whole patient collections thing is going to take at least 6 months for it to become ingrained into your culture in terms of employees and providers, but also into your customers, your patients' culture. But ultimately, you will succeed. And I say that because I think if we don't succeed at this aspect of our business, then our office may not succeed to serve the community in the future. Well, Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you so that we can have our great presentation from TriZetto, and then I'd be delighted to answer any questions that our audience might have. Jeff?
Excellent, and thanks. That's great information, Elizabeth. So yeah, we'll let you stop and catch your breath a little bit. And why don't you, so you stop sharing. So I'm going to get the information ready here for Lori and get her online. Let me just go back here a second. Are you there, Lori?
I am, yeah. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Well, we've got Lori Roberts from TriZetto Provider Solutions. So go ahead, Lori.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you everybody for joining the call. Elizabeth does always such a great job. And what we're going to talk about at the end of this presentation is just if you haven't ever looked into or considered a clearinghouse solution, or if you've never switched, or if you're just unclear of how it can assist your practice, just those are some of the basic things that we'll talk about today. Some offices, especially chiropractic offices, a lot of them will typically veer towards the free clearinghouses. And what isn't always explained at that time of using a free clearinghouse is it sure is great financially, but over time it really adds up. There's a lot of manual processes that go along with the using a free clearinghouse, as well as claims get lost, and there's not a lot of great tracking or customer service. So there's just a lot of hidden fees when using a free clearinghouse. So if you haven't looked into a clearinghouse service before, or you are using a free clearinghouse, I definitely would recommend reaching out and I can do a quick 10-minute overview of how it would work through our service if that is something that you guys are interested in. Just some basic things about our service specifically is that we have over 4,000 electronic payer connections. And what that means is that we are able to take your claim and send it to the insurance companies. 92% of those connections are direct connections, and that's really great because that's just a way for us to get your claims to the insurance company directly after passing our edits. And 97% of those claims that we do send to the insurance, they are free of errors, and that's wonderful. It just means that we're able to catch a lot of those issues up front, because if you've ever received a rejection or denial, they always have issues paying once things have been kicked out. So we always want to try to get those things corrected before you get them out the door. Some other things that TriZetto offers is just some proactive tools and reports. We want to make sure that we don't leave any outstanding revenue left on the table for you, or considered in limbo, or I like to call it the black hole. So we definitely would like to help you out if you guys have a large write-off due to claims getting lost, or just whatever the case may be for you guys. With our system, we do have a one portal login. So a lot of offices that we do talk to are using multiple websites, trying to submit their claims directly to maybe the payer directly, if they're able to do that, using maybe 6 different ways of submitting claims. And that just becomes difficult for tracking purposes. And then same thing for ERAs, going out to multiple websites, downloading the remits, getting some in the mail. So with the TriZetto service, we have so many payer connections that we would be able to be that one-stop website for you, so that you can send your claims, receive your remits, and even check your patient eligibility if you want to check it online. And we also offer, just a side note, we do offer billing and credentialing services. So if that is something that you don't want to do in-house, that is something that we do take on those services as well for offices. Jeff, I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. And just to give you kind of an overview of what the next steps would be, maybe this is the great idea that you were looking for 2018. Just to tell you like how it would work is you can be up and running in about 10 days. So what starts this process is within 24 hours of sending in a contract, we will do a kickoff call with you to discuss your insurances that we would need to enroll you with. Now, we do most of those enrollments for you. So we just need you to let us know what those insurances are so that we can do the enrollment for claims and ERAs. If there's something that we need from you, we will send it to you via, like, we'll fill out the form as far as we can, and then we'll send it to you for maybe an electronic signature. And then we'll also want to do a test file just to make sure that everything looks good before you start submitting claims live. And then after you receive your approval of the test files, that's when you're ready to start submitting claims. So the time frame does depend on your insurance carriers once those enrollment forms are submitted, but a lot of insurances are 10 days or less. But if you are questioning or concerning anything, always talk to us about your concerns, because we can always help you out, and there's always other suggestions that you can do as well. And then the next slide just has my contact information. So if you have any outstanding questions or would like to see a web demo of the workflow, please reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to assist you with going over any questions or any concerns that you may have. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks, Lori, and they'll be getting this information when we send out the link to the video as well, so they'll have your contact information. And again, thank you for sponsoring not only today's training, but last month's training as well. Okay, Elizabeth?
Yes.
All right, well, I'm going to start unmuting people, and if anybody has any questions or comments for Elizabeth, now is the time. If you would like, go ahead and just speak up. Trying to get everybody unmuted here. Does anybody have any questions for Elizabeth on any of the information she presented either today or last month? Anybody?
And I would love to hear other ideas, because I know there are other wonderful ideas out there to really improve this. So if there are no questions, if anyone could share with the group best practices that they've found to really work for their office.
Anybody like to share any of their best practices? Or do we have a shy group today, Elizabeth? Yeah. All right, no questions or comments for Elizabeth? Well, I guess they don't, Elizabeth. We'll certainly send this information, out to them, the slides and the recording. And I guess if they have any further questions, they can filter them through me or get a hold of you as well. So again, I want to thank you for spending the time with us this month and last month, and we look forward to seeing your information as it comes out on the internet throughout the year on billing and collections, and hopefully we can all do a better job moving forward.
Me too. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.